Every race car is fitted with a race seat. They're critical for the comfort, control and safety of a race car. We're here at Racetech, a New Zealand manufacturer of racing seats that you may have seen in categories such as V8 supercars, ALMS, Grand Am, as well as World Challenge. And we're going to have a chat to David, the director, and get a bit of a glimpse into what goes into the design and manufacture of a race seat. We've managed to track down David and he's agreed to give us some insight into the design philosophy behind Racetech seats. So David, when it comes to designing a new Racetech seat, what are the important considerations you've got in mind?
Well, firstly, from a safety point of view, supporting the driver's body in the right places, the thigh, the pelvis, the shoulder and the head, and keeping all of those in the same relationship to each other. So then a driver can handle a huge impact in a crash. The other thing is obviously feel of the car. By our philosophy of fixing at the shoulder level, the seat is a lot more rigid in the car, therefore the driver can feel the car a whole lot better and drive faster for longer.
Now that is an aspect that I think is quite often overlooked, the ability for the driver to stay more rigid and fixed in relation to the chassis and the steering wheel gives improved control and improved feedback from the steering wheel.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no better way than to feel the car by the seat of your pants, and that's exactly what a seat does in a race car.
Now let's talk a little bit about weight. Obviously weight's the enemy of speed and it's a consideration when building a car. How important is weight in the design of your seats?
Yeah, very important, especially for the professional drivers and teams. They're looking for every bit of weight they can find, and that's the other advantage of our philosophy with the shoulder fixing, is we've been able to take weight out of the structure of the seat and still maintain the same safety levels.
Okay, can we go out to the back and have a look around the factory, see how they're made?
Sure, let's go.
When it comes to the material selection for a race seat, there's a few options, obviously Kevlar, carbon fibre and fiberglass. Now David, what are the sort of design criteria around those materials and how do you decide what to choose for a particular seat?
Well, the other one on top of the ones you've mentioned, we also have a hybrid, which is a Kevlar and carbon fibre in the same weave, which is the main product we use on our carbon seats for the outside layer. The reason for a mix of Kevlar and carbon is the properties of the two materials are quite different. And carbon can be quite brittle, although it's very strong. Kevlar has a bit more flexibility in it, so it can take a bit more of a hit without breaking. Then the bulk of the product in our high-end professional seats are carbon, and it's carbon all the way through. Different weaves, different weights, and used in different places in the seat. Then the more basic seats are the composite fiberglass seats, which have a Gelcoat finish on the outside, and then the fiberglass is laid into the mould from there.
So in terms of those different products, are we talking about just a different weight, strength and price bracket for each of those materials?
Yeah, basically you're talking about a fiberglass seat being double the weight and half the price is a pretty good way to look at it. So a carbon seat, twice the price, half the weight.
So that really is why they're more designed towards that high-end market?
Yeah, or people who just really want to try and save some weight in their car.
They also look pretty good too.
Yeah, they do. We like to think so. And we get a lot of compliments about the quality of our carbon product because they are all hand-laid, and so there's a lot of skill involved to get it right.
Okay, let's move on and have a look at how the materials are cut. So next up we've got the cutting machine that's used to cut out the material for the seats. And David, this is a fairly new product for Racetech. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely brand new. When we moved into our new building, this was one of the pieces of kit we wanted. We knew that it was going to allow us to get more consistency and quality in our product, so and improve some efficiencies as well.
So this is a computer-controlled cutter?
Yes, it is. So all the patterns that we used to use in cutting by hand have now all been digitised, and so we lay the material out on the table, and the machine cuts it all out to shape, and we just pick the pieces off, and they're ready to go.
So every single piece that's being cut out is obviously exactly the same, so there's no wastage, every seat comes out the same.
Yeah, that's right, and eventually we'll get some more efficiencies out of it as well, and better product raw material savings by just being able to nest things better and as we learn the machine more.
Okay, let's go and look at your other new piece of equipment, which is your robot.
Okay, fine.
Now, pretty exciting for us at HPA is this particular piece of equipment is Racetech's robot, which is used for trimming the raw seats after they come off the moulds. Now, David, first of all, traditionally, how was this task handled?
Yeah, it's a dirty, nasty job, creating a lot of dust and smell and noise, and it was done manually by the guys using jigs to put over the shells to trim them to. So it was a very time-consuming, very dirty, very smelly job.
Now let's go back a step. When these seats come off the moulds, there's obviously a lot of sort of excess material to the outside edges of the shell, and this is what we're talking about, removing that, trimming it back so the seat's ready to be covered, correct?
That's right. So it's about trimming the edges, cutting the holes for the harness guides, cutting the holes for the mounting bosses. So the other benefit of it is we get absolute consistency. So within fractions of a millimetre, so the seats are perfect every time. They're the same every time. So we know that we're putting out the right product to the customer.
So the product you're using, it's a robot cutter. So talk us through how that works.
So the robot is obviously computer controlled. It's programmed to the shape of each different model of seat, and then we put them into these jigs, so each seat model has a different jig that it sits in. The robot comes down, cuts the holes, and finished product.
Great. Consistency's got to be good when you're dealing with that many seats as well. Let's go out and have a look at how the seats are actually laid up into the moulds.
Right, let's go.
Now, a lot of the fiberglass seats that you produce, David, have a black finish, which is the Gelcoat, and that's where we are now, where that Gelcoat's applied to the moulds. Can you tell us what that Gelcoat is for? Why is it used?
Well, it's a polyester resin as well, so just pigment it up to be whatever colour you want. And our seats are always black because that's what the customers seem to want, so that's why we do it. But it's a material that goes onto the mould, which then obviously once you've laminated the fiberglass into it, it comes out of the mould as part of the seat. It's very much harder wearing than paint. It's quicker to apply because you're applying it before you fiberglassed it, etc., etc. And you end up with the same really high glossy finish, which comes off the surface of the mould.
So that's why it's superior to the paint. It's actually part of the seat. Now, how does that contrast with your carbon Kevlar and carbon seats where we can actually see that weave coming through? Are you still using a Gelcoat product on those seats?
No, absolutely not. It's just purely epoxy resin. So all of the carbon seats are made with epoxy resin. Gives us a bit more working time, allows us to put in the really high-tech materials that we're putting into the seat in the right quantities, etc. And the finish on the Kevlar carbon fibre seat is purely the epoxy resin that's come off the mould finish.
Okay, let's move through and we'll see how the Kevlar or fiberglass is actually laid into those moulds.
Great.
So once the Gelcoat's applied, if it is being applied, we move into this laminating section, and this is where the fiberglass or the Kevlar or carbon fibre weave is actually laid into the seats. Now, let's talk a little bit about the process of how that material is applied.
Okay, so we've made the choice a number of years ago that we would do wet lay, hand lay for our seats, and part of the reason for that is that it's for the quantity we're doing and the process we're going through, that's the way we've got the best consistency and the best strength in our products. So the fiberglass, the material's cut on the cutting table, comes across here and it's laid into the seat and then wetted out with the polyester resin. The carbon seats are very similar. The materials are cut on the cutting table or by hand in some cases, and then laid into the mould using the epoxy resin and then rolled out and then vacuum bagged.
Now, in terms of the amount of material that's being laid into the seats, how many sort of layers are we talking here?
Well, it varies. I mean, in some places, in some of the seats, there will be up to 20 layers. In other places, there's only a couple of layers. It really depends on where we need the strength in the seat and where we're trying to save weight, etc. So, and obviously the fiberglass seats tend to be twice the thickness of a carbon seat to get the same strength.
So that's where that weight saving comes in with the more advanced and stronger materials?
That's right, yeah. I mean, carbon's obviously a lot stronger. You don't need as much of it to achieve the same strength.
Okay, let's move on and have a look at the next process, the vacuum bagging process.
Okay.
So this vacuum bagging process, what have we got behind us, David?
Well, obviously you put a plastic bag around the material once you've laid the carbon into the seat. Then a vacuum bag's put over it and a vacuum is pulled onto that bag. And then the whole bagged product is put into what we have behind us here, which is our oven. So we have a CNC controlled oven that ramps up the temperature in the finished product and cooks it overnight. So that when the guys come back in the morning, they take it out of the oven and debag it and demold it.
Okay, so what advantages does that vacuum bagging process and cooking it give to the finished seat compared to just letting it cure at room temperature?
Well, first of all, the vacuum bagging actually sucks the material down, so it's a very much more condensed, solid laminate of the carbon and resin. And then obviously the epoxy resin needs to be cooked to actually get it to cure off properly so you get the maximum strength out of it.
So this is all about getting the best possible results, the maximum strength from that laminate of carbon fibre, Kevlar, fiberglass and the epoxy resin.
Yeah, we don't do it on the fiberglass, it's purely just on the carbon, but it does give us a very much more condensed laminate and sucks out any excess resin, which obviously then saves any weight as well.
Right, well let's go and have a look at what they look like once they come out of that oven.
Cool.
So once the seat's made its way out of the oven and it's been trimmed by your robot, it comes here to this grooming station. Tell us what happens in this particular station.
So I guess the first key thing is that we put in the mounting plates, which are made of a special material, very hot, medium tensile steel, so that they can't pull through the seat, and they're a certain size which the FIA mandate. And then the polyester seats are all groomed after that, so they're buffed to make sure we get a nice high quality finish. Obviously the epoxy seats don't need that, they're just clear finished and that's the way they are.
Okay, so what's next, David?
We go next door and that's where we apply the foam, both energy absorbing foam and comfort foam, and then obviously the sew and cover which gets applied to the seat.
So we're at the last station now, which is upholstery, and let's talk a little bit about what processes go into this.
Right, so the first thing, the shell's obviously brought over from the buffing and bossing area. The final checks are done on that before they put the cover on. But the next stage is really to put the foam. So some of the seats have energy absorbing foam in certain areas to obviously absorb that impact crash type scenario. And then after that we then apply comfort foam in certain areas of the seat as well, and then obviously the cover.
So that final cover, that's actually handmade here in-house as well?
Yes, it is. Yeah, the material's cut on our cutting table, and then we have this very industrious lady who sews all the covers and end up with the product that you see when you buy a seat.
Now, one of the other features that you offer is custom embroidery as well. You do your embroidery here in-house?
No, we don't. It's the only thing we don't do in-house, and it's just an economics and a time thing, but we can do anything in embroidery. If somebody comes up with a logo that they want to put on, or their name, or something special like that, no problem, we can do all of that.
So that's a really nice way to personalise, add a real personalised touch to your race seat. So once we're finished with the seats here, they're upholstered, what's the next step from here?
The next step is labelling, so we have to follow very strict rules with the FIA to make sure they're labelled correctly, and every seat needs to be serial numbered, and then they get put in a bag and boxed and ready to ship all over the world.
So whereabouts are these seats making their way in the world?
Well, obviously Australia, USA, UK and Europe, South Africa, Japan, Thailand, Malaysia, Middle East, all over the place.
So it really is a complete worldwide recognised brand now.
Yeah, not dominant yet, but we are aiming for it.
Hey, look, David, it's been really interesting getting some insight into how these seats are manufactured, and I thank you for taking the time to show us around.
No problem, thank you.